Good morning, everybody, to Wake Up and Deliver with Matt and John. As always, we are here to talk about all things supply chain and logistics. Today, we're going to change it up a little bit. We're not going to have so scripted of a dialogue. I'm still going to provide some morning coffee for the brain. I think that fits in what you were talking about, John. The idea is if you want the highest quality information, you have to speak to the best people. The problem is many people claim to be experts who really aren't. I'm going to pass it over
That's
to you.
interesting. Where did that come from?
Oh, that's my brain food. I get every Sunday. It's
Nice.
it's a newsletter.
I think that's very cool. I think that's very true. I think a lot of people will speak without really having a great understanding. And I mean, I think unfortunately a lot of stuff on social promotes that, right? Just about people making statements or whatever.
I think it's quite prevalent on LinkedIn itself. I think there's a lot of people who say they're experts in the field and they get consultants in or whatever, and it backfires because they aren't truly.
Yeah, actually, and that's probably like an interesting topic, because when you think about it, the amount of people that will go on and that will say, "Oh, I know how to do this, I know how to do that," I see all the time. And look, don't get me wrong, I'm the first person to admit that straight up, like, I know what I know, and there's probably all kinds of things that I don't know. And I've always adopted, whether it's in the work that I do now or in my corporate life, it's like it, strong opinions loosely held. So it's like, go with things that make sense, where information and data make sense, but quickly allow those things to drop off and gravitate towards more or new or interesting things once the information shows you that what you might have thought before was wrong. A lot of people don't do that. A lot of people just want to believe they've got their niche, their little trick. They try to hide their cards, and they just keep trying to play them over and over again.
When did fake it till you make it became a common thing in across all industries, not just in logistics? I think it's very bad in logistics, but a lot of people will just be like, "Yeah, I can do everything. I can do this. I can do that. I can move flatbed over dimensional, no problem." But then when it comes down to it, they have no clue what they're doing, and they ruin it.
Yeah, they ruin it, or the unfortunate thing is they kind of get through enough because they're very often dealing with people who don't know it themselves, so they don't know how much better it should be. It's like in some ways it's kind of like the blind leading the blind, right? Like if someone's hiring someone, they're like, "Oh, this person sounds like an expert. I don't really know what's going on." And as long as the person can do it, I I think that there's some space for it. I mean, the fake it till you make it thing, in the sense of giving people opportunities, and if they're really focused on self-improvement and learning and making it better, that's one thing. But when it turns into just like sort of like one mess after another with no improvement, that's where it turns to trash pretty quickly in what we do.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's too prevalent in our piece. You see all the LinkedIn quotes.
Actually, but okay, here's an interesting example though, tied to something I saw over the weekend. So there's someone in my network that I follow. His name is Mike Angel, but with two L's. So if you're, I'll put his post in there in a minute. But he has a really interesting thing when you're talking about like data, information, or experts. So he's a very smart guy, and like a lot of his posts are very interesting. He's got his pedigree and what he's done. He started doing some posts though about like delivery and stuff like that, and he's really been analyzing things like Uber and DoorDash, and like looking at what the platforms will tell you where you make money versus what his experience of actually doing it now is like. And I didn't realize he was actually doing the deliveries, but he started, I don't know, for whatever reason, he's getting into it, probably because part of a project that he's been talking about that he's working on through Shopify.
Right.
Anyways, very interesting to see, that information, like someone really doing a very strong test and learn approach, and being very open to feedback. Like the comment section on the post and everything is great.
And what's the company that Michael? I'm trying to find him as we're chatting.
Well, like I said, his company or what he does, I think, is something very different than what it is. So he's got a few different type of companies. He's been a founder for different companies. Some of the things he's doing recently right now are like, and I see Roberts in there. He's doing airships. He was trying to work with an airship to see if he can get like that going, and that's kind of interesting because you posted about some stuff with that not too long ago.
Yeah, I did the flying whales out of France, which is I think it's a pretty cool product. I don't know if anybody else has heard about it, but the flying whales are just giant warehouses, almost blimps. Fly one, and then that's something that he was doing too.
Well, he's doing his own kind of thing. Like he's actually trying to build it himself, like and doing the iterations. And it's really interesting because he's showing how he's like he tried to do one. He's that company that he's founded called Meep, MEEP, and like just showing where it's like the thing wouldn't inflate, it couldn't work, it couldn't do this, but like very open. He's a very interesting individual, very intelligent. Like you can just it just sometimes when it just comes off people, you're like, oh wow. So he's a very intelligent guy.
Interesting. And as always, anybody wants to jump up and join the conversation, this is an open forum. All you gotta do is hit the raise your hand button next to the react button, and then unmute yourself. And would love to hear from you, or if you have an idea of a topic that you want us to talk about.
I feel bad too. So it's gonna be butchered. So I see. And this is total. I'm apologizing way in advance. Like, so I see Katerina there, or Katerina. I don't know how you pronounce it. I did see your post the other day about why you changed your name or how you had to change your name for the verification. That's nonsense. We've been connected forever, and you've been talking about like meal. Does a lot of restaurants and meal different kind of analysis, like quick commerce and stuff like that. So thank you for popping in if you want to come up for sure. But yeah, her post was interesting. It was about like, some of the good features of that. We've talked about this before too, right? Like the good features on LinkedIn, like we've been having some back and forth about these shorts. But the point was more around the verification, which you and I have both done. We've both verified on LinkedIn. And I didn't really have any issues with it. It seemed fairly smooth, but to the point, I also like my name, my given name and birth name and identification names are all exactly the same. And that was a little bit of a discussion around the fact that like it'll fail verification unless like your profile is set up exactly like
mine
how
isn't.
your ID is set up.
Mine isn't at all. But let's give a shout out to Robert though, because he finally got some funding. He posted it on link.
Yeah.
So congratulations. I know he just left, but
he's up and on, but yeah, very cool to see that too, because that's interesting. So if you guys don't know, Robert does something, his endeavor right now is called Cargo Fish, which is using, he wants to use utilities, so like underground pipes and stuff like that to move product and food. Very similar to what Pipe Dream is doing, and there's a few others. But yeah, Robert's one of the people that's been talking about that the most. I think when I first connected to him on LinkedIn like 4 or 5 years ago, he was on it. So he's really stayed the course. I think it's an interesting concept. And I do think that there's definitely a space for using whether it's utilities or infrastructure, right? A number of months ago, I had posted about how China was using a lot of their subways, like sort of the tunnels and the subway trains in the middle of the night when there's typically no passengers to move freight, which I actually thought was very interesting. Now, obviously, like those cars aren't really built for it, but you could definitely see that, if by making some modifications or really developing a system to make that work, how you could get a lot of value out of that.
I find it very interesting. A lot of these old concepts, because this is not a new concept, are re-insurging back into how to solve problems, right? Like back in the 50s and 40s and 30s, they had the tubes that go between buildings to deliver messages. That was a lot quicker.
Although the vacuum tubes, Home Depot, when I was working, Home Depot still used that to transfer cash to the back rooms when I worked there.
I mean, these are just the old systems of delivery that people are coming back to. Same as obviously running stuff on the subway or with people. People used to just get packages. You used to jump on a plane and you deliver that package wherever you're flying to. And that was a very common thing. You used to have like a FedEx guy go to the airport. You go, hey, where are you flying to? I'm flying to Shanghai. Here, grab this package. I'll give you an extra $100 to do this. Oh, okay. This is before security was a big issue on planes. But
could you imagine? Could you imagine if someone came up to you today and was like, "Hey, Matt, where do you happen to be flying today?" It's like, "Oh, I'm going to like Mexico, where you just were for your conference or whatever." And it's like, "Cool. could you just bring this package for me? I don't think you could run away fast enough
No.
like for how shady that would sound in 2024.
But even if you talk about the last mile aspect of it, like back in the, like I remember I grew up in St. Catharines, Ontario. In our house, there was a bungalow. We had a little open area for milk to be delivered because it was an old 40s home. And those obviously went away, but I can see those coming back as a delivery method that is obviously far more secure. You have like a code scan, you open up the little milk window, you drop off your package and move on. You know, I've talked about this extensively with Gary, and that was very popular in the UK and other places in the world. But I can see those coming back as the last mile becomes more prominent, because back in the 90s and 80s, everybody switched to the mall, everybody switched to the brick store, so it was less of that last mile aspect of it. And I find it interesting that we're this cyclical in our logistics endeavors.
Well, so that's actually a funny segue into maybe something else, right? Because I think that's something you and I have talked about a lot, about the fact that we're a touch older, not tons, guys, a little bit, but anyways, touch older than you know, a lot of the sort of new generation of people coming into logistics, right? That, you know, maybe don't have the same exposure or appreciation for a lot of the structure that brings efficiency and stability and reliability and all of these great things. So I saw something interesting. So obviously, with, you know, now getting back out there with Monarch and a lot of the type of focus that you have, Sifted did a podcast the other day with someone who runs, I think their business actually called Frozen Logistics, but, you know, obviously they would do more than that. And the question made me laugh, because the guy was like, the host Caleb was like, "Hey, what's the hardest thing to ship?" Without missing a beat, this guy's like, "Milk." And I'm like, yes, yes. And his explanation was really interesting, though. And again, it kind of segue into two things. One, he was talking about the fact that milk or products in that sort of type of category are extremely hard to deal with, because of the fact that it's not just about one temperature zone that you have to manage. It's like, by keeping it chilled / like 2-3 degrees or whatever it is, it's harder, because now you're having to fight against heat on one side and you're fighting against freezing on the other. He goes, it's actually easier to ship ice cream, which I would agree, honestly. You know, from a lot of years of doing that kind of stuff, that as long as you don't have like equipment, process, or facility issues, you know, and you can actually keep it frozen, that for sure it's, you know, once you just either have to keep it kind of hot like dry vans, or you're keeping it completely frozen. But in the middle is really suspect, because it can fluctuate a lot more, on top of all the sensitivities and stuff, like how easy it picks up odors. But so that was funny, get your take on that. But then a bit of an extension to that is also what you're talking about too, about some of the older logistics and the challenges. There's been a huge boom of like people being far more open, probably because of obviously content creation and other things, but showing like back rooms of stores, showing like the inside of their fulfillment center. Like, I thought it was funny, like Timothy Dooner from like, you know, What the Truck or whatever, Freightways, showed this video of like a couple of guys trying to open a trailer door with like a forklift, probably because, you know, the product hit the back door and it wouldn't come up. But like, people look at these videos and they're like, "Oh wow, look at this crazy once in a lifetime thing." It's like, no, guys, like, this is like the back room of stores. Like, this is what's happening on a regular basis.
Let's go back to the milk thing for a second, though, because I find that interesting. I wonder if a lot of it has to do with the regulations that are out now, because milkmen were very common back in the day. They used to have a crate, and I don't think they were that concerned about that refrigeration and that perfect temperature.
Well, I think that has a lot more to do about the fact that the world wasn't as concerned about food quality standards in a lot of ways than anything else.
I don't think people were dying in droves over it. Like, I don't know.
No,
I don't know.
People were drinking it daily. Like, you bought like whatever was delivered. Like, to your point about like, you know, the little door in the last mile delivery, it was like what you got delivered was pretty much for the day. That's where the whole concept of milk runs, and the milkman being so popular around the house for the stay-at-home family members was because the person was going to be there every day, right? So it typically, like, and that's the thing with milk, right? In general, most people are like, when it goes bad, they're like, "Oh, it's bad," like, you know, other food, and they think nasty stuff, like, you know, in the way that like a lot of other food can go bad. But I mean, that from milk being quote unquote fresh to the time that it's bad or as it's going bad, all that is like the natural bacteria count that's like building back up. And even when you get exposed to a high like dose, and you could drink like, sour milk, you're not really as exposed to a lot of the health risks from it as you are like it's just going to probably not agree with your stomach and need to move on, right? So it's an interesting thing because they could leave it outside, people would drink it that day and they would be fine, and then the milkman would be back the next day with another bottle.
Yeah, but that's actually segues into a lot. And then I know Robert pointed that we want some more last mile conversation, but kind of going to talk about it anyway. But it's interesting how the grocery aspect of last mile delivery doesn't talk about refrigerating that product. And I wonder if there's like a point where if someone bought meat and milk and they have a bit of a drive, who's liable for that aspect of that product maybe not being as fresh anymore? Because I don't see anybody talking about that online. It's always just.
I think that's kind of the whole problem with like grocery delivery in general, right? Like, it is the fact that there's not enough infrastructure and there's not enough opportunity to make these deliveries. Like, people have to be home. Like that is the problem, unless they're just getting dry or whatever. But because of the refrigerated, the perishables and whatever. Or frozen, especially too, like anything that needs like to be maintained, you have to be home, and that's where the biggest issue with grocery delivery is. That's why Instacart still is like available to work, is because of the fact that people are essentially home because of their promise. Like when you see like all of these other guys doing it, whether it's some of the grocers that we'll see around here, or you see stuff in the States. Like those are all slotted time windows that keep people trapped at home while they're waiting for those deliveries. It's the biggest issue.
Have you used one of those home deliveries yet?
No, you know what? I'm not a big delivery. I'm not a big delivery user. Funny enough, for all of the work that I do, I have a hard time if I can do it myself, not doing it.
So you don't wake up and get deliveries. You wake up.
I don't wake up and get delivered. I don't know.
That's interesting. But segueing into again another topic, let's talk about your purchase over the weekend. I wanted to talk about that. I think this is going to be
exposing me on that one.
I'm exposing you on this one. I think John did something sacrilegious to our community, and I'm exposing it here live on Wake Up and Deliver.
Yeah, you're.
Would you like me to tell everybody what you did, or are you going to admit it yourself?
I did. No, you go ahead, since you've already like set me up to be slain. So
I'll make it far worse than it really is.
Well, that's okay. I'll dial. New mics and things like that. So I will continue with the story for a sec. Oh, there we go. He's back.
I hit the wrong button. Sorry.
You hit the wrong button. Okay, well, finish kind of crucifying me, and then I'll set the record straight.
John was very eager to try out some new services out there, even though he does wake up and get delivered. Even though he's not admitting it this morning. We've been talking a lot about last mile deliveries, a lot of different aspects, especially around Temu and Shein. So a little bit of a jumble. John went out and ordered something on Temu that he needed at a critical time. And it doesn't sound like it's going to get delivered when he needs it. And he's been watching this progress of this product. I don't remember what it was. It was some kind of gold chains or something.
Oh my god! Okay, so this has already gone off the rails way too far. First, it was Shein. It was from Shein, not Temu.
Sorry.
Okay. Second, it's actually a silly purchase, and I fully agree. But it had a dual function. One, I wanted something really dumb and something that I knew would almost be impossible to find in stores. And then two, I've never actually purchased from any of these guys. So we talk about it all the time. I have obviously friends, family, and things like that do it, but I myself had never actually purchased about it. So a little bit of curiosity and intrigue around the process and around the fulfillment and seeing how it goes overall.
Get to the topic. So, what is the product? Everybody wants to know.
The product. Okay, so the product is actually an absurd blazer. And I bought that because I'm going to go to a 2 Boxes event in like a week and a half, like a networking event, and look at some of their stuff. And I just pure want to stand out. Like, it is a ridiculous blazer. It look, you remember that image you did? I actually thought you would like it. You remember that image you did when we first really started getting into Midjourney about like the dude covered in paint?
Yeah, yeah. It was the
100
Colgate one.
that's the blazer.
That's
That's
awesome.
the blazer. It's like all like paint splattered print and everything like that. So it's like everyone's going to be wearing their like, you know, chic clothes and being all done up and stuff like that. And I'm going to roll in with this white canvas base blazer that looks like someone just accosted me through an art show. Yeah, see? No, I knew I wasn't going to find that in the store. So like that was just going to be a wasted whatever amount of effort. And yeah, then I was just curious to be like, okay, let's see how this is. Funny enough, the product has actually already shipped. Okay. And it's already improved its delivery estimate by 2 days on the range. So I think the initial range was something like the 26th to the 28th. And then this one now is like the 24th to the 27th. And I'm willing to bet you, and I bet my daughters, because they were like, oh, Dad, that's never going to come in time. I'm like, listen, guys, the second this thing makes the plane, it's game over. And we know how much these guys are shipping. So I am actually very curious when this is going to land, literally, and then how long it actually takes to get delivered. My prediction, okay, is that by Friday of this week, it'll be here for sure.
What format is it? Is it UPS? Is it FedEx? Does it tell you on the website? Like, what does it? What
I
does it
didn't
look like?
yet, and I gotta, for whatever reason, Microsoft is being a little bit suspect with my update with one of my accounts, so I got to see why it's not updating. But I can't. I'll look in the email, but I can't see from the original information. The only order / tracking number was like it looked like their own internal thing, so I'm not expecting tons. And from what I've seen and people that I know that are doing a lot of their volume, they are leveraging a lot of like regional type players that have really underbid for this business. So I'm just expecting a very nondescript delivery. I don't think that there's going to be much of a delivery experience to this product, but we shall see.
I think there's a lot of that going on because I've noticed a service change, and I mean what I mean by that is the service quality has gone down tremendously for Amazon, at least in my region recently, where packages are constantly going missing. I think a lot of these providers have come in, these regional ones come in quite low and aren't delivering as proper as the previous guys, and it's affecting service, right? But you know, with Amazon, it's extremely hard to make a complaint or talk to a customer service, so you can't really follow that metrics anywhere. But I've definitely noticed that a lot of these regional players have come in, started providing deliveries, and are struggling on that aspect of it.
Oh,
And it's not the same quality as it was months ago, even when it first started. When it first started, was just like, you know, white glove, thank you, sir, appreciate your service. Now it's like, you know, throwing it from the cars or driving by like Bart Simpson.
it's like you were all happy getting your new mic until it hit you in the head.
Until it hit me, you know, I'm out there, you know, trying to pick some weeds from my garden. All of a sudden, something, you know, hits me in the head here. It's not the same anymore, right? And that's, we've talked about this multiple times. That speed of delivery is, I think, is killing the service of it. It's putting bad taste in people's mouths.
Yeah. Well, because last mile delivery in general is super bad. It's funny because I saw someone, the CEO of the Unscented company. I've been trying to get her attention and stuff like that because I think they're based in Canadian based, whatever. But like, they posted something about a cool box. It actually is a very interesting box that they came out with to reduce packaging. Basically, you know how they have all of the filler and like airbags and stuff like that in these e-com packages. They designed this custom box because some of their products come in their own box, so they have like a fixed dimension, so they know what the size is, so they can put it in the master box and then fold down the leaves or whatever, and it perfectly secures the product because it can double bend. But it's funny because I said to her, I was like, oh, well, look, that's really great. Now keep doing some more innovation and leave like plain brown box shipping to Amazon. And she laughed about it. But like the funny thing is, to your point, and for people that may not know, like, did you know that the average Amazon driver lasts less than 8 months doing that job? Like, that's how high the churn is for that work, because it is brutal and thankless. And it just, to your point, it never stops. And when these regional carriers come in that are underbidding, being like, oh, well, I don't know why that DSP or whatever would need X, or that I can do it for $3. It's like, okay, you're going to get killed. Like I stood in the dock and I saw 10,000 Temu orders come in. And I know these people were delivering it for like sub $3. And I'm like, that just doesn't feel like this is all worth it.
It's funny that you mentioned some price, because Robert's asking us to tell us specific costs of last mile deliveries or any freight in units of currency per ton. Do you know what the currency per ton is for some of that stuff?
It depends. So it depends on what you consider like last mile cost. So like I did one point like a pretty decent analysis on Amazon on their DSP model in the US and in a call it major metro. And it came down to, on average, and it's going to be a little bit loaded, Robert, but it came down to about $1.25 per package in terms of like their cost. Now, obviously, that's not really spread across the weights and stuff like that. And you could argue that like the weight of a package really matters. But, one thing that I often advocate for in last mile is that once you have the capacity, and when you look at the profile for what's being done, especially to now e-commerce with the huge tendency into sub 5 pound, and now they're growing like 1 or sub 1 pound volume, like the weight and the dimensional weight and all of this nonsense that UPS and FedEx have pushed, like the days of filling trucks top to bottom and maxing out the cube, like that's over. Like that's over. So, the idea is more on time. So that's why, I don't really spend too much time with it. For sure, if it's oversized and stuff like that, it's going to take them a little bit longer. But yeah, I think it's more around like $1.25 US in the Amazon model. And when you're thinking about, and to contrast that, when you're thinking about like UPS, for example, especially now with like a little bit of a richer contract, you can definitely see stuff that's more like anywhere from $3 to $6 in terms of actual cost. But the challenge is that the $1.25 for Amazon, that's very exclusively like once it's actually just on the truck and the day, whereas like a $3 to $6 model, like $3 to $6 range for a UPS would be more network expanded. I do think Amazon would be very similar, or just around $3 to $3.50 when you're thinking about all network, all in for warehousing and movements and middle mile and all of that stuff. But that's where you really see the volume making a huge difference, because you can do even some middle mile movements, which I know is not what you're thinking about for last mile, but even like middle mile movements where it's like once the truck has to go from point A to B and you have like that, like that's it. If you think about it at a per piece count or a per unit count of whatever is being moved, it can go anywhere from like, $1.50 to $2 all the way up to $7 or $8, depending on how much space or how much volume is on the truck. And at some points it makes sense, and at some it doesn't. So I think it's really relative. Mike jumped in. Mike's ears he's wondering why maybe I tagged his post.
You didn't. I tagged him. He was actually talking about it. So we did talk about Mike's post, and he did want to see what we were saying.
Do you want to share, Mike? Do you want to tell us more about it? I started the day talking about how cool I've enjoyed those posts and stuff like that.
If you want to raise your hand,
share, you have to offer. Yeah, you got to offer. We can't just bring you up.
Might not. So anyways, there he is.
Yeah, he's there. He's raising his hand. Okay, like let's do it. This is great because that was very impromptu. Now you have to unmute. It's a very convoluted process, Mike, to get up.
Perfect.
There we go. You look good.
I needed to work out the unmute button first.
Good morning.
How are you guys?
Not bad. So maybe John first recap what he talked about, so Mike gets the context of what you said. So it's all positive, not him not thinking we're trashing him this morning.
So I gave you a rave review about like the work that you've been doing, and then Robert wants to come up too, so you can add him. I gave you a rave review about the work that you've been doing with Meep and how cool that's been. But lately about your Shopify sort of project or endeavor, and sort of my supposition or whatever that you're that's why you've been starting to talk about like Uber and DoorDash and doing deliveries and stuff like that, to see how all of that integrates into the platform and project.
Sorry, I think I might have missed a question. Was a question on that as well?
Sorry, just tell them about your recent posts.
Oh yes.
About DoorDash and Uber and why you might have been doing that, and then I gave a brief overview. So feel free to introduce yourself and the work you do and what's got your attention right now. But yeah, that's what came up this morning.
Yeah, I suppose I'm Mike. I've been building in e-commerce for 20 years now. I've worked for Shopify. I've also worked on every platform that's kind of ever been built. So to put context to this, so the delivery thing actually came out of I'm building an airship for like local delivery. So I actually started doing the DoorDash stuff for that because I to be honest, I just needed to run some quick calculations on like what's an average delivery, how much weight does my airship need to lift. And the Shopify app actually came out of doing it because I was obviously going to all these merchants and it's like, well, all these guys are kind of struggling with their systems. And if you've ever walked into a place that's doing Uber and DoorDash, they have like 10 iPads all hooked up to different systems, all printing out to like 10 different receipt printers. It looks like a giant mess when you walk in there, but it works. So I constantly thought, I just went, wow, the state of technology in this space is kind of a little bit behind. So I started to look into it and obviously saw an opportunity to build a Shopify app that makes Shopify available to restaurants. So
I think interesting that the airship space is growing in even the middle mile. Not to interrupt you, John, but like even the middle mile is growing with flying whales. We were talking about a little bit earlier, like these flying warehouses to help. Even they're talking about having drones go in and from it to pick up deliveries and then deliver into larger urban neighborhoods, and having this airship move through areas to make deliveries. I think it's a really neat space. I'm definitely going to be following what you're doing because I think it's quite interesting.
Yeah, I also gave you some praise for, and you could hear it right away. You see what I'm saying? Like, very smart guy, like test and learn. I love it. I'm all about like the test and learn and validate. So that's very, very cool to see that you're actually getting right into the weeds, because I think that that's so important when it comes down to it. I think when it comes to a lot of this logistics stuff, people don't realize how messy some of the models are, and then on the flip side, how sensitive a lot of the models are. Like, it can go from working to not working very quickly.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, so I've run warehouses before, and people don't realize how much effort it actually takes to do things correctly. And then how little margin you have to do. It's like you basically don't have a budget to do it as well. So it's like, how do you do it with almost no resources?
Yeah, I agree. And that's funny because it's interesting to see, like, in the retail space, and we're going to get Robert to share in a second here because I know he wants to add to this kind of conversation, but it's like, everyone's talking about like, oh, like, look at what is it, Indodex or whatever, like, the parent company of Zara or whatever. And it's like, they're doing this and Nordstrom's doing that. It's like, yeah, like some of these companies, like, yeah, they're building infrastructure, but they're doing it on the back of like industries that have 50, 60, 70% margins. So it's interesting to see sort of the big split and the shift when, you're dealing with certain companies that have like more money than they know what to do with, and other people that are like, man, if I make a wrong decision, I'm losing $50 in order immediately, and I have no chance to recover that. It's a really huge range these days. So interesting. Robert, you want to talk a little bit about costs, and Mike, you met like this. So Robert does, he's an advocate for, I'll call it infrastructure-based deliveries. I know you can get into it, Robert, but really more about using utilities to do last mile. And I think we caught his attention with some of the costs discussion that we were talking about. So, Robert, you go ahead, buddy.
Hey, thanks, John. It's exciting even to discover that I could join the conversation.
Yeah, that's the whole point of this thing. That's why we do it.
Well, I didn't expect to raise my hand to do what it did. I got to thank Mike. And, well, I've been actually, what you just said about what goes into you don't have large amounts of capital, because I'm just a full-time working everyday guy who 14 years ago read a book about last mile and availability and distribution. And one of its big comparisons was the rise of Netflix and the fall of Blockbuster and Hollywood video. It's a great book. It's called The Long Tail, and it was written by Chris Anderson, and he used to be the editor of Wired magazine.
Mhm.
And he's since moved on, I think, to drone delivery or something like that I don't see has much promise, to be honest.
Oh, I know. You kill me every time I post about it.
It doesn't.
It's okay. I actually love it. I don't mind. I'm just saying.
Well, I've done the analysis of the specific cost and specific energy intensity of transportation, all of it. Satellite, shipping, conveyor belts, all of it. I've been at this for 14 years, and at the same time, I've been developing basically a micro subway, the smallest. My only competitors that are active, one is called Pipe Dream Labs. They're very active. They've raised $13 million, Series A, just in the first quarter. And they have a 3/4 mile pilot outside of Atlanta, Georgia. And they're active on LinkedIn. You can find it. And it's good video. And they only have 3 core design decisions, which are an Achilles heel in the light of anyone who comes along with better design choices. And that's me. And I'm not just coming along. I've been there all along. I just didn't catch anybody's attention for any funding yet. Except
Well, that's not true. You won a grant. You did win your first grant not that long ago.
I haven't got the money yet.
You need the money first, is what he's saying.
Yeah.
I discovered their answer I was zoomed in on the board meeting May 17th, and you may notice I'm at the bottom of the list. You needed 70 to even qualify to get any grant money. There were only 3 others that scored below 70. Anyway, so I'll have the money soon. I was able to retire from full-time employment last December. And so I've had a half a year now. I spent 3 months of it writing grants, one successful and one unsuccessful. And I'll post more on that later, the reviews, the misconceptions that people get. It's so hard to bring people along because human nature is to make a connection with things we already know. And there's so many things people already know that it's like changing their religion to bring about something significantly different from what they know. And so if I say, well, I'm going to build this and I'm going to do single vehicle testing, and then I'm going to build additional vehicles and I'm going to do multi-vehicle testing, 2 of the reviewers on the grant I was unsuccessful said, platooning. He's doing platooning. No, multi-vehicle, that means more than one vehicle. If I wanted to say platooning, I would have said so. But if you're in an enclosed track, you're already platooning by default. If you're familiar with the Chana Tunnel, it's 2 main tracks. Each is a single direction. And about every 800 meters, there's a cross pipe that ventilates between the 2 tracks. And that limits the pressure head above a train in either direction by venting the air that's compressed in front of the train over to the other track, which is, if any train is moving through it, being pushed in the other direction where it can vent back behind and fill in the vacuum behind the train. So it limits the pressure differential that's generated by a vehicle moving through an enclosed track. I mean, it reminds me of an above ground swimming pool, because if you're in a swimming pool and water to your waist and you walk through the water, there's incredible resistance to your movement. But if you try that around the perimeter of a round swimming pool, there's resistance to your movement at first, but soon you get a whirlpool going in the swimming pool. and it's very easy to move along, at least at the speed that the whirlpool has been accelerated to. And so there's a lot of physics to be considered in the design of a good system. And but back to price, the difference in cost for freight on the ocean, it's 20 ton miles per penny for bulk freight. That's the range of how cheap it is. North American rail freight is only about 3 cents per ton mile. Pipelines moving oil or refined petroleum products, they're still only about 2 cents per ton mile. Long haul city to city truckload freight, that's about 30 cents per ton mile. Even after post-COVID, 30, 35 cents. It was only 26 before. But when you look at a wholesaler running a distribution route to retailers, that's $5 to $50 per ton mile. When you order stuff, whether Amazon claims delivery is free or not, that's just not telling you what it costs. And it costs thousands per ton mile. When you tip the waitress to have your food brought from the kitchen, it takes a waitress 6 to 12 months to move a ton a mile, because she's only carrying a few pounds at a time, and she's only moving it a small fraction of a mile at a time. And so there are orders of magnitude, the range of cost in freight distribution in general, and last mile distribution in particular, is at the extreme high end of that scale. So,
Oh yeah, for
a
sure.
lot of room to improve. Now, and when you look at last mile distribution of urban residential freight, let that be the material goods of everyday living. First eye opener is 99% of it does not depend on the strait, because water usage constitutes the bulk of our material everyday needs. In America, we're using about 75 gallons per capita per day. If you rounded it to 100, it's easier to do the math. That's close to 800 pounds per person per day. And the water that shows up is typically there to take something down the drain. And so that 800 pounds is being removed per day as well. And that is roughly 100 times how much grocery comes and goes to the house. So the bulk of urban residential freight is handled by municipal water and municipal sewer. And only about 1% is handled by the road and is handled by these incredibly expensive, labor and energy intensive methods of delivery. So that's
Yeah.
why I build what I built.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that there's a lot there. I mean, this is obviously a super meaty topic, and I mean, you could probably get into it forever. So I definitely appreciate you sharing that. I mean, the math and the systems behind it. It's an interesting problem. And Mike, before we kind of wrap up, we usually try to go to about 7:30. Love the conversation this morning, so we kind of try to give everyone back their morning in a few. But curious what your thoughts would be on some of that, because I would agree with Robert that like the costs are substantial, and there definitely has to be room for improvement. And you've kind of gone a different way with air, so maybe a bit of a last word or a thought on the balance or the position there, if you want, before we wrap up for a little bit for this morning. But super great conversation, Robert. Please do also post anything you want in today's comments to give people maybe a little bit more, because Matt and I are going to kind of share a little bit about what we talked about this morning.
Thanks, John. Great being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely want to definitely ask some questions, but like what comes off the top of my mind straight away is like, I definitely admit rail is like way more efficient than putting anything in the air. But like, how do you just acquire the land to do it on? Like, there's just some places that, I don't know, I just feel like you can't get the approval to build it. I guess that's definitely probably why I took the air route, is that like, to be honest, air is kind of an unregulated space. So once you can put something that's lighter than air in the air, you don't have to pay to pass over any pass of land that you want. So although, like, to be honest, if I had a dream, I actually think the whole system should be a rail system or something that's all interconnected, and you can just send stuff down the line. I just don't know how practically you can get the agreements in place to get things from A to B, especially when you have a very dedicated idea of where A to B is. Because there's always someone in the middle that says, "Hey, I don't want you crossing your tracks over my land." So
or the
Well, I
cities
don't-
too, right? Because you can't have railroad tracks across downtown New York City anymore. You need that air aspect of it, or
For sure. I mean, what Robert's talking about, again, it's not over, it's under, right? So the idea is utilities, but I still think I think, Mike, you're probably right in the challenge, and in the sense of, well, what happens when it's not already there, and who picks up the cost of it, and how long does it take to build and stuff like that? And
exactly.
all of those challenges, even though you're right. And I mean, maybe it's a hybrid solution that eventually comes up where you have these main arteries that really are moving things to certain key locations, and then you have to have sort of like a modified or a modernized hub and spoke. But I also tend to agree, and this is where even with people like Britton Ladd and stuff, like I'm like, look, everyone doesn't like drones or aerial drones especially, but I'm like, unfortunately, there's too much incentive and there's too much opportunity to make like what's today very inefficient effective. And I think that's what continues to push the innovation in the space, is just because there is that, to your point, that irritation point of like, yeah, but if I need it to go at exactly this location or in this direction or at this time or in this way, to your point, air, there's no real barriers, right? I mean, even some of the stuff I posted about some of this new larger drone type approach that they took in China, it's like, it can go wherever it needs to go.
Yeah, I completely. And I think with me, what really changed me for air is like transport. Like, as much as you think about transport, it's like a 2D space. Like, you draw a map on a grid and you can only go between here and here. But when you start to think about air, you've turned it into like a 3D space.
Mm-hmm.
So like, even if it wanted to go there to there and there's already someone traveling between there and there, you can just go over it or under it. And it's
Yes. Yeah, exactly. 2,000, 5,000, 7,000 feet, whatever, or everything in between.
Yeah.
Very cool. Anyways, look, very awesome conversation, guys. Totally got into some stuff we weren't expecting. So, Matt, I don't know, maybe the unscripted and random mornings are a faster way to wake up and deliver versus trying to pick and choose for everybody.
Oh, we just had the right crowd this morning that wanted to listen and chat, which is fantastic. We appreciate everybody coming on and listening. And obviously, we'll continue this every Monday morning at 7 a.m. for those who want to come back. Eastern Standard. Sorry, I forget. I think everybody's set on Eastern Standard Time, and continue the conversation. We're going to go any direction that people want to chat, or what me and John find interesting of the week, because there's always something in logistics happening in the last 7 days or the next 7 days. So by all means, everybody's always welcomed. And thank you so much for everybody joining us today. On that note, have a great morning and deliver.
Yes, and please feel free to post your stuff in the channel so other people can take a look at what you're up to.
Awesome. Cheers.
Thank you,
Bye, everybody.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you, guys.